evening. We are here on location. It's a secret, but let me tell you this. We'll get into this in a minute. This is the Community Solutions podcast, and I am Jason Bradley at the helm, as usual. My partner in crime, Andrew Richter.
Hey, another show. Here we are to inform the viewers everything they need to know. I mean, we give the audience what they want, no doubt about it.
That is correct. And today, I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit. My UMD Bulldogs, not that I intended UMD, I was a St. Scholastica kid, but being from Duluth, and I always watched the Bulldogs growing up. Today, they advanced to the finals in the Frozen Four, so I'm a happy guy.
Well,
a sports team in Minnesota that I care about doing well, that warms my heart.
Yippee, and I got 4 cents off gas today, so
yeah.
That's great.
Well, I mean... Your Twins were 3-3 when I left them today. So,
they won.
Yeah.
They won. I'll tell you what, I am the baseball guy here. There's no doubt about that. Nobody else can name how many triples Earl Combs had in 1927-23, by the way. Only I can answer that. But, I mean, the Twins 3-0, still too many strikeouts, still too much, can't get a guy from second to third. There's still a lot of fundamental things from Little League that they still don't do. So
right.
I'm glad they're not going to be out of it by opening fishing, but outside of that, I haven't become a Saints fan yet.
Well, that's good. We've got kind of a different show for you today.
Unusual. I'm not the star of it for once.
Oh, is that the way it works?
I'm not the star.
Is that the way it works?
Well,
I'm glad to know that.
I'm not the co-star. Let's put it that
whatever. That's fine. You want the limelight, you got it. Any complaints, please email them to Andrew Richter at... No.
Don't say it. I don't want to get overwhelmed.
All right. We have a friend of ours, Dave Pascoe, in with us today. He is running for the deputy chair position here in 2017 of the MNGOP. So we're going to talk about a ton of stuff today. When he came out for the deputy chair position, heard him say some incredible things about his views on what local politics mean to statewide races, to the state party. And we've known Dave for a while. He lives here in Crystal with me and was chair
with you. Yes.
Well, not with me. In Crystal. You don't live
city.
You don't live with me in Crystal.
I just wanted to clarify. I was waiting for the full introduction to him. I need to clarify that right now. I'm not living in his basement.
No,
I want to make it very clear.
That's true.
Okay.
I don't keep him chained up to the pipes.
Thank you.
None of that stuff going on.
For that, I already regret being here today. That's awesome. All right. Well, I want to ask you about the Twins. Kind of going back to that for a minute. Is this a Viking situation where it's everyone's getting excited and things are all going to fall apart? So
I don't know.
Give me your analysis of
that. My analysis could take a while.
Give me your brief 30-second analysis.
My brief 30 seconds is I don't think they can hang for 162 games. That I don't think. I don't think they have the pitching. They have, I'm not a believer in bullpens. I'm old-fashioned. I don't like the order of the lineup.
Yeah,
I'm old-fashioned in that you need a Dan Gladden at the top, you need a Kirby Puckett batting third, and the Twins aren't constructed that way. And the offseason was a mild disappointment. I don't know how you lose 103 games and make no changes. I don't, the Dozier situation might have frozen them a little bit, but that situation should have been dealt with right away. You could have moved on. I don't know. I think that they have a lot of raw talent that needs to be honed before they can really be a contender. But look, I'm not going to complain if they start winning ball games.
Whatever you just said, I completely agree with. Whatever that was, I'm totally on board with it. So.
Hey, you're a baseball guy. That's what you're telling me.
Clearly.
Last nationally Triple Crown, Joe Ducky Medwick, 1937. Come on, we all know that.
My fiance she keeps book at baseball games. I have a friend that does that too, and I met in law school, and it's like, why are you not just watching it or drinking or doing something more entertaining? entertaining, and it's like, this is what you like to do. All right, fair enough.
I used to keep score on the radio when Herb Carneal would say, hey, 6-4-3 double play if you're scoring at home. I was the one guy scoring at home.
You were the one guy scoring at home. Oh, my word.
Luckily, my race for deputy chair is not, baseball knowledge is not necessary, which is really good.
That's good.
Very good. I'm more of a nerdy Star Trek person. If that can be at all useful, which it is.
Yeah.
Once every month there is a Star Trek trivia at the Driftwood Bar in Minneapolis, and that's fun. And we usually lose because there are people that are so much bigger nerds than me and my friends, and it's amazing because I am not good at social interaction. So it's crazy. It is crazy.
So this will be perfect being on a podcast.
Being on a podcast, yeah. Well, I grew up in radio. Working. My mom worked at a radio station for 55 years, like 18 to 73. Worked as the data manager, like the back office, scheduling commercials and doing stuff like that. Office manager for a radio station,
right?
News talk and country, and I worked there for several years myself. So I just grew. My godfather was the owner of the station, so spent my formative years in a small town rural radio station doing that sort of thing. And so I like podcasts. I like anything that's it's auditory, but I don't have to. My shirt is untucked and I'm not wearing a tie, so this is perfect.
That is good.
Yeah. None of us are wearing ties.
Well, my mom used to tell me I had a face for radio, but that's good she didn't tell you that. So working at a radio station, there's lots of experience there.
Yeah. I got a body for radio, so it's perfect.
Oh, well, I want to hear a little bit more about that. And as you tell your story, some of the things that growing up in rural New York, in a small town, that you were able to glean that kind of helps you in the way that you think about things now, with the way that local elections are important in a state, and especially in New York. I mean, you go to New York City, it's nothing but very liberal, very top-down, very oppressive government.
This is not an exaggeration. One of my best friends from high school, he owns now 2 vegan donut shops in New York. One in Brooklyn, one in Manhattan. Extremely successful. Killing it, crushing it. And I'm trying to get him to franchise out in Minneapolis because I feel like there is a niche for that here. You can make a lot of money. But no, I mean, he is one of the most progressive liberal people I have ever met in my entire life. But you know what? There's a place for you, and that is Bushwick in Brooklyn. Like, that is where you go. But no, so I
successful people, I salute them no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you put in a vegan donut?
Well, luckily sugar is still vegan.
Thank
so
goodness.
you can work a lot of different things.
Yeah, Bill Clinton eats plenty of sugar. If you saw Bill Clinton, you'd think he was ill, but he's not. He's a vegan.
His skin is hanging off.
He looks like he's like a skeleton almost, but he's a vegan. Yeah. That's what the deal.
A little like Count Chocula.
All right. Leave that cereal.
Let's go into more into cereal.
Anyways, back to your story.
Well, I'm originally from a small town called Hornell with an H, and that's not Cornell with a C, or not Hormel the meats.
Right. I was going to say, I've had your hot dog.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just like Abe Lincoln had to be president of the United States for people to realize how you spelled his name, because otherwise no one would ever know how to spell Lincoln with that extra L in there. No one would do it. So it's about an hour south of Rochester, New York. In my town was mostly Irish and Italian, and I am one of the oddball Welsh German people from the town, but it's Irish railroad workers, and that was the industry. There was a ton of farms. Worked on a dairy farm in high school. The agribusiness industry. New York used to be the #1 dairy state, and Wisconsin took it. I think California has it now. I think Wisconsin lost that a few years ago, but it used to be New York. New York used to have thriving farms, thriving small towns across the state. Buffalo, Rochester, all these places were booming and doing amazing things. And what's happened in the state of New York, and it's really similar to what's happened in Minnesota, is you have the population center, which draws everyone in. You have a single horse town, or like one industry town, that will just the industry will go away, and then there's no jobs or anything, and all that's there is state workers, city workers, county workers, and that's all it is. So we could not, where we lived, we could not really depend on Washington. because our congressional district was like the size of, twice the size of CD6. I'm not going to say it was the size of CD7 or that's the western part of the state, or CD1, which is the south, but it was a pretty large congressional district. So you're not seeing your congressman all the time. Your state rep is a county or two. The state senator is 4 counties. So you're not necessarily getting a lot from the state. I grew up in a Republican area, but the state legislature was always Democrat because it's New York City, waits it out. But interestingly, even though we're in a very Republican area where I grew up, the mayor, who is not running for a re-election, he has been mayor since 1985.
What?
Strong Democrat. And the Democrats ruled this city of 10,000 people for the last 3 decades. And, with a brief interruption in the 80s, before that in the 70s, Democrats, strong, progressive Democrats that go around and they support things that are contrary to the interests of small towns. So it was me and a couple of other guys, this is, 8 years ago or so, I guess at this point, that started to try to roll that back. And, you get 1 or 2 city councilmen, and you get a couple more, and you find people that are interesting and engaging, and you get them to run in these races, and they pick up seats. And now it's not just one protest vote. It's not like we have in Hennepin County where you have Jeff Johnson, the protest vote, 6-1 vote against Jeff Johnson all the time. There was one loud protest vote, and that was one of the guys that was leading this charge. And then you turned the city council, and now it's a 10-person city council. Now there's 6-4, and the mayor's not running again. And you've got, after 32 years, you have a viable Republican candidate that might actually win the seat.
Wow.
And it takes time to do that, and I understand that, but seeing that experience and having that, my political universe was my hometown. And I worked on some congressional stuff and some state house stuff, but they're so far disassociated from your regular day-to-day work. You have the local elections, and that's what you pay attention to.
Right.
And then here in CD5, so, fast forward to being treasurer and then chair of CD5 and then working in Senate District 60, which is in Northeast Minneapolis, the only thing that we can do to get people to change their mind is to show up at events and door knock and have one-on-one voter contact. It has to be personal. It has to be individual, and all politics is local. So people will ask you about local things even if you're running for Congress. So you have to know, like, if you're in Bloomington, the situation with garbage pickup and what the different areas are going to be. And if you don't know about that, listeners, it's a fascinating issue. And if you don't live in Bloomington, you probably have never heard of it. But it's, it lost a state house election on the 50B election because the Democrat, and this is Ann Lincheski, was the 50B House representative. She resigned. And the Democrat, in a special election, the Democrat contender lost that very safe DFL seat because the Democrat contender was on the wrong side of the trash pickup issue on the Bloomington City Council. So the Republicans held that seat. Chad Anderson won that seat. He unfortunately lost it in the regular election. But it just shows how in tune people are with local elections. It has informed my thinking in CD5 on the only way to change people's minds here. And then winning statewide, I mean, what have we done, or what have, not we done, I moved in after you've saved Crystal, but what have you done in Crystal? You have driven a Republican, and not just Republican, but conservative, or at least more common sense minded wedge in a progressive liberal area. And expanding that over the state, where Democrats do that in other places. The reverse of what you have done in Crystal is what has happened in my hometown, where it's solid Republican, rural, conservative voters that have a Democrat city council and mayor.
Well, if I can ask now,
please,
did that mayor run as a Democrat or?
Yeah.
Okay.
In New York, it is you register by party.
Right.
You are. And local elections are partisan, so it's not, your race is out there. But you can also run as independents. Very often, what does not happen in Minnesota happens in New York, where you can run on multiple ballot lines. So you could run as a Republican, a Libertarian, and Independence Party candidate all on the same ballot. So your name would show up there 3 times. Wow. Minnesota doesn't have that. So the Democrats often run as the Democrats, and then sometimes they'll be on the Green Party line. The brave ones will run on the Socialist Party line, but the Republicans will usually see the Republicans on Republican, Conservative Party, and Independence Party, I think. An independent, something along those lines.
Okay. And you had mentioned how a lot of the policies that were coming out were not good for your small town. We find that here, and I know Bloomington's a big town, but as we talk about specific issues in specific cities, we say, hey, this is probably happening in your city or the next one over. So it's good to pay attention to what's going on in other cities because they're copycats, we find. And so we found, like in Grand Rapids, putting in bike trails. Why are you doing that? Yeah. Why do you want high density housing in Independence? Why do you want, and so what things in New York how were their policies working against the interests of the people there? Did you feel? How did you notice that occurring?
Well, I would say more on the lines of the candidates they were supporting and the policies they were looking at from the state. Okay. So they would be supporting candidates that would be generally big tax increasers across the, so like U.S. or not U.S. but state Senate candidates, state House candidates, gubernatorial candidates, and if you've got a mayor that everyone loves, he's, like I said, Irish Italian town. So this guy is like. Sean Hogan's the guy's name, and he's the most Irish guy ever, without actually being from Ireland.
Hogan.
Yeah, Hogan would be more Irish. So, people loved him, and whatever policies he's put forward doesn't matter, or the candidates that he's supporting. So he would have big government candidates that were killing rural jobs, because New York had these things called empire zones where they'd have geographic areas where you'd have tax cuts for those certain areas. Right. But say you had a manufacturing plant in X location, and then in Y location is where you're getting those materials from, but Y location is not an empire zone. So you have big government, state government coming in and kind of trying to even out this playing field. They don't understand the playing field. They don't understand industry or commerce. And those are the types of policies that this mayor and this city council and the Democrats were advocating.
Sounds like an enterprise zone here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it sounds like, one area working against another. Let me ask a different question. When you say they were supporting policies, were they campaigning on state issues, not local issues? Was that another issue, or were they campaigning on issues relevant to your city?
No, so with this particular mayor, he after he won his race in '85, and then he won re-election, and it's a 4-year term, he had token resistance through the 90s and the 2000s. So he was not going out and campaigning on specific things. He would just be supporting certain things and vocally, and he knew he didn't have to kind of fit what he was talking about or fit his city, because he could be pretty safe because people liked him for the most part. And the same thing is true, so a lot of, and this is true in Minnesota, where a lot of the mandates come down on the counties, and the state says, we're going to put this great program into place, but the county, you're going to be in charge of administering and funding it.
Right.
So he would be doing that sort of advocacy, and it would be coming down on the county to do that. And we see the same thing here.
Sounds very familiar.
Right.
Minsure, anything like that. The county is kind of the mules, if you will, and some of these things are funded, some of them aren't funded.
Right, and we see cities a lot of times abdicating their duty to stand up for the people that live in that city to allow the county to be able to administer these bigger programs.
Yeah, my father is a city council, or it's not city council, he's a county legislator is what they call him in New York. So he's a county legislator, he's a Democrat, an accountant. He's one of 3 Democrats on the board, and he is the most conservative person I have ever met in my life. A Trump voter, super conservative, but he is a Democrat, and he will always be a Democrat, and it's just the craziest thing in the world. But 94% of his budget is mandates. in this county in New York, in Steuben County, New York. And I know it's not that bad here, but it's, like the trajectory, it's like the trajectory. So 94% of what he has to do, the taxes he takes in, the programs that he administers, he has no control over. It's a state mandate, and he has to do it. Right. Yep.
Wow, I mean, that's amazing. And that really is the problem, is that we have kind of cut off the power from local governments, and we just keep giving it to bigger government all the time. And we see it, the federal government trying to come in with their tax dollars and say, here's some free money, implement this.
But, there's a two double-edged sword to that. One is, we have a lot of people taking the free money,
right,
and then complaining about it after the fact. It's kind of like, you knew what was in it when you took it. We don't see that resistance from a lot of cities. Look, we're not going to take your grant money. We're not going to take your free money. We're not going to do what you want us to do. But there's a lot of pressure on cities to get with the program.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure on them to adopt green energy, adopt alternative modes of transportation. There's incentives, if you want to call free money an incentive, I guess you could call it that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things from the top down, but we focus a lot on the top down, we don't focus so much on the bottom up, which is what the Constitution envisions in the United States, that the government closest to you is what you should be paying the most attention to. And so many people have it upside down. How do we turn that around? How do we get people to focus on the non-sexy jobs? It's not a sexy job to be a Hennepin County commissioner. If I walked into a bar and asked 20 people, about maybe 3 of them could tell me they're county commissioner, maybe 1 could tell me a lieutenant governor, and I bet none of them could tell me what a county commissioner does or what they're actually in charge of. So how do we break this you want to call it an achievement gap? I'll call it a knowledge gap. How do we, Hennepin County controls $1.7 billion budget. Okay, we're sitting there arguing in the entire state of Minnesota about a $40-something billion biennium. $1.7 billion is 1 year in Hennepin County. How do we refocus that, or can we?
Obviously, we're of a different breed that we do, like that's it's hard, like with our background and, what we've seen. And what I've seen with what drives people into municipal races is it's some very tiny nitpicky thing that some assessor did something that some guy didn't like, and then all of a sudden he's running for county office or something like that. It's like, so if we can get more jerk bureaucrats on city payroll, that'll just motivate people, just like very arbitrarily kind of ruining people's day by citing them for some like trees that are overhanging or something.
But you're right. It takes something happening in your neighborhood to get people to go, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Because I've always said the further down the ballot you go, the less people know. Whether that's judges, park districts, soil and conservation, city council, sheriff, that's another big one, whatever, the further, it's almost like something has to happen so close to you and your neighborhood that is the trigger that gets somebody.
It was for me.
It was for me too. I mean, it was both. But for me, I'll say this, for me, it took not just that, but the attitude of the people who were in charge. The attitude of the people in charge were, well, we made a decision. You weren't at some work session where I couldn't talk anyway. It didn't matter. We've made our choice. You go home. I mean, people who've been in power for so long, they get drunk with that.
And that's why we're here today, because of that. And it's unfortunate that it takes that most of the time. Like anyone that I know that is involved in municipal politics, it's usually that sort of a story that drives them. The maybe a little bit of a silver lining, or a brighter direction to go. What we just did in the CD5 convention, it was a Thursday evening. It was a little bit late, 2.5-hour convention, but we had a bartender. We didn't do it on an early Saturday morning. We tried to keep it moving along and whatnot. So even with, I think 12, 14 speakers that we had come up, it was still an event that was relaxed, it was comfortable, it was not stodgy. And I think that when anyone is ever going out to try to advocate for this stuff, they can't couch it in the boringness of what they're really trying to do. So I ran for the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation in 2013. Oh. Like, by the time you're done saying that, people are like, I'm closing my door. I don't want to talk about that. That's terrible. It's an extremely powerful position. There are 7 chartered positions. There are actually only 6 that are on the board right now. But you need, I think you need 5 votes to pass any bonding or any tax levies for the city from this Board of Estimate. The city council can do whatever they want, but this Board of Estimate, you need 5 votes to actually get something through. It's extremely powerful, but no one knows about it. So I ran for that because I'm weird and that's what I care about. But first of all, I shortened it. I'm running for Board of Estimate. It's about bonding and, the taxes, keeps your tax low. Like, okay, all right, I'm in. I did not go into the ridiculous the minutia. It's not just one bonding levy or one tax rate. There's all these different funds, and so I didn't go into that because people would die or punch me or both.
Sounds like you when you ran for mayor.
I was
Ricker.
just going to say that was the one. If I had one big mistake I made, it was trying to. You can't educate and run for office at the same time. You can't explain to somebody the debt service on the comprehensive annual financial report without it going over people's heads. The guy down the street won't cut his lawn. Yeah, who cares about that? Well, look at this debt service. They don't.
Right.
It's not. So the challenge is to break it down into simple pieces so people can understand and people can get something that they can latch on to.
Right.
That they don't have to do all this work and this research. That's what we're here for.
Right.
That they can there's a concept out there that they can relate to, they can you and I have talked about this in Crystal. We used to talk about the old debt rate, how it was 7 times the size of the budget. You put that in simple terms like what? What it is? Huh? Oh yeah, we're paying bonds off on this till 2027. We are? Well, get them out of there then. I mean, it was, but it took it was a learning curve to be able to do that.
And I always find that if someone has a question, if you have the answers, go into it. Because if they ask you, fair game. Yeah. Now it's time to put them to sleep, baby. All right.
Hey, you know what? Don't be afraid to say I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. You don't want to give her wrong.
Right.
So that's
I'll get back to you.
Something I've learned way too.
Well, I mean, in the deputy chair's race, there are people that they want to talk about data. Like, the data systems that the party uses, and that's all they care about. And I can go so far, and then it's I don't know after that point. And there's other people that just kind of want to say, are you prioritizing winning the governor's race? Yes, I am. Okay, well, you got my vote. I'm like, all right, well, that was easy. Thank you very much. And it's like, if someone opens the door, I will go in and I will answer the questions to the best of my ability. But yeah, I go as far as the voter wants me to when it comes to discussing
That's
stuff.
a great plan and a great transition point. So you're out in New York, and I don't know what brought you to Minnesota, if it was a promise of Texas tea and
law school.
Law
school. It certainly wasn't taxes.
Yeah, it was not. It was not.
But you came here and got involved, and you're not just a big city guy here, being in Minneapolis, moving to Crystal. You're in the service, you're with the reserves, you're out in Moorhead quite often, out in CD7. So you've seen a lot of small town stuff. Can you explain a bit about that experience and how that has kind of formed your opinion of local races and why it matters? Why people should pay attention and to more than just what goes on at a state level.
Sure. Well, I've been to Grand Rapids twice during this campaign season. I mean, I'm in the reserves. I drill out of Fargo, So I'm going through Moorhead, and I've gone to the convention there and everything too. But so Grand Rapids I've been to twice, and I'll talk about that specifically because it feels very similar to where I grew up. Just there's hills, and there's the population is kind of similar and whatnot. So and it's a vast, large county. So that's comfortable for me.
Itasca County.
Yeah. It's bigger than the county I grew up in, but still pretty big. And the type of people there remind me of home, and the things that they are dealing with, especially with the range Democrats, and the fact that there's such a disconnect with maybe some of just internally with a lot of the DFL voters up in the 8th district, and that's a whole different podcast to go into. But
there's got to be a disconnect between them and like the city Democrats. Got to be a big
they're like my father. They're Democrats because that's what it was. And I keep pounding on the table.
They're Democrats from another generation.
Yeah, exactly. But the places there, and I said that I worked in radio advertising, or I worked there for a couple of years. Rural radio, $1,000 in a rural media market is a huge amount of money. $10,000 is a huge amount of money for advertising, for a state senate, for a state house, for a city council, for a county race. And you do not have the same issue that you do in the Twin Cities, where the media market is just so saturated. You can plunk down 10 grand in one radio station, but you're not really going to be hitting the majority of the people that are listening to radio or watching TV. Not everyone watches the nightly news, not necessarily the demographics that you're looking are watching the nightly news, but the media market in Itasca or Brown County or wherever is different. And that's something that I think that a lot of candidates there do not necessarily understand, or a lot of the people that the state party do not understand because they're not from a rural area. They don't have that background in campaigning in a place where there's not a huge population density. Yeah.
Do you feel that there's some sort of disconnect currently between what happens here, politically speaking, in the cities versus what's going on out in the rural areas?
Yes. Just first of all, the types of candidates that could win in one area, they're not going to win in another. I'll give an example. Dario Anselmo is a Republican. He won the race in 49A, so that's Edina. He is fiscally conservative, great family guy. He happens to be pro-choice. I am not pro-choice. He would not win in many districts across the state of Minnesota as a Republican, and I understand that. But I'm happy he's not going to go in some sort of pro-choice rampage at the state capitol. Yes, he shares views that are different than mine, but he's capable of winning here. And I'm glad we had him run twice. He went out and ran 2 campaigns to get in there. There's a disconnect because I don't think many of the people that are in the Twin Cities bubble necessarily understand that is true. And on the other hand, a lot of people who are in outstate Minnesota do not understand that Donald Trump was a huge problem for candidates in this district. Donald Trump lost in the 5th and the 3rd by large margins. There were candidates in Minneapolis who were name on the ballot Republican candidates that got 12%, 15% of the vote, that doubled what Donald Trump got. So there were Republicans that were showing up to vote, and they voted the Republican ticket except for Donald Trump in places like Minneapolis. And this is to say that it's nice to have my foot in both areas, to kind of understand the rural, understand that mindset, and understand the urban mindset and whatnot. But I feel like a lot of times there are people on one side or the other that just say, no, this is the way that it has to be, and they try to shoehorn candidates and messages into one, and it does not work.
And if I took anything from the 2016 election, just generally speaking, I'll make it national for a minute. It is the disconnect between urban and rural areas. Forget the suburbs for a minute. But, I mean, if you look at... We have never been, I don't think, more divided as a nation, urban versus rural. I mean, and you're right. It does cross party lines as far as issues are concerned. You go on an individual issue, you might find common ground with somebody even of a different party.
Yeah.
But if you look at Trump's vote in Minnesota, and you're right, he won the 1st, he won the 7th, he won the 8th. The last presidential candidate to do that in Minnesota was Dwight Eisenhower. I mean, the districts were different then, but if you look at that, and you look at the 3rd, I mean, if he'd have won the 3rd, he'd have won Minnesota.
Yeah.
So I mean, but again, the 3rd was slightly different than the outstate, and you had that dynamic going.
Yeah, I mean, it was
weird.
Yeah,
I don't know how to put it.
Well, yeah, weird was 2016. Like just things that like no one expected to ever happen. What we're talking about is the feeling. And I understand the feeling because growing up in a place that was so far away from the state capital and the power centers of the state, you feel left behind. And then you have someone like Donald Trump who's going to come along, and I know that this is a local podcast and we're going like very national, but like we're rolling. It's all right. But you have someone like Donald Trump come along, and he is a wrecking ball. People in places in rural Minnesota, rural New York, rural California, they are angry. They have been. Can you bleep swear words out?
I'm gonna been shortchanged. Right, they feel like they're not being listened to.
They have been crapped on, and they don't want to just believe in the same sort of paddling that they've been thrown in the past. So they want to believe that someone is going to go and knock them down. And that was, I think, for a lot of rural voters, what Donald Trump represented. I totally understand it because I grew up like that. And I hate it. I hate being that far away from the city or the far away from the state capital. And I hate having to feel like, all right, we're on our own out here, and everything that you're doing in the state capital is the antithesis of what we need to thrive in a new economy.
No, so that brings us back to the deputy chair race.
Okay.
You know, we're talking about I mean, we're making, Republican Party is what you're running for, deputy chair. Conservative ideas, however you want to frame them, liberty-minded, however you want to say it. And you've got Minnesota, a great state. It's an example of that, where you've got this huge outstate with a handful of big cities in it. You've got the Twin Cities and all the suburbs and the outer suburbs all thinking something differently. I mean, let's just be honest, they're all different. I mean, what do you see as, how do we go forward in Minnesota? How do we, you look at what happened with the party in 2016, where we maintained the legislature. Senate is now a one-vote majority. We have, the Senate's not up, but the House is, with the constitutional statewide offices. What's got to happen now with that?
So
how do we it's one thing to win an election, it's another thing to govern and then reintroduce your ideas to the public.
I'll paraphrase, and maybe I'm going to distill down your question. So you're asking me how I save Minnesota. How do I do that as deputy chair of the Republican Party? Allow me to promise you many things.
Say it that way.
I'll just put it down. So what the Republicans in office need to do: follow through on their promises, be brave, take out Obama or Minshew, deal with that issue, hold firm on tax cuts, and maybe not blink when it comes time to have that fight with Dayton about the shutdown. You have to, they're going to have to negotiate. I understand that. I do this party officer stuff because I am a very small government, liberty-minded Republican, and you know what? That's not going to work on a state senate or a state house level here in Crystal. It's just not going to do it. So I would rather build up the organization so you have more candidates, feel comfortable about going out and running those types of races and having those types of messages, and not just saying it, but actually doing it. It gets so frustrating.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because the frustration level is high. I mean, I can tell you from, I'm an activist. Okay, I'm not a party officer anymore. I'm nothing like that. The frustration level is up there. I mean, it's up there with the House budget. It's up there with the failure to repeal Obamacare. Again, we have a lot of time to do something.
The fact that we refuse to do anything about the powers of the Met Council.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you go to a Tea Party meeting, they'll talk about it, they'll agree with you, then they go to St. Paul, and you look at the Republican House budget, everything's fully funded. I mean, there's increases to K through 12, and I mean, I'm not asking you to defend that or rip on it, but how do I've always felt that there's a disconnect between the politicians and the activists.
Yeah.
And how can we get that gap? How can we bring those two sides, say, hey, look, here's what's politically feasible, here's what we want, here's how we incrementally do it, or whatever. Does it feel to you like we're making progress, or am I...
Well, as you said, you can't be a candidate and educate the voters at the same time.
Are you going to quote me?
I am. Means I was paying attention, which is good, right?
That is good.
So the fact, you have a legislator, and he or she's in office and is doing decent stuff, but then kind of gets wobbly on one issue or something like that. So then an activist who's also a voter in their district is going to come to them and ask the questions. And usually they're not in the mindset that they don't want to really have a discussion. Some people do, let's be fair, but most of the time, if an activist is angry at their legislator, they're not going to have a civil give and take. They're going because they're giving a piece of their mind. And they're not really interested in the same way that you can't go and educate someone about the Board of Estimate and Taxation. You are
Maybe you can.
I could not. I did not win my race, unfortunately, for that. The Democrats knew that I was a Republican, though. Like it was a nonpartisan, quote unquote, wink wink race.
You were like me, you couldn't hide.
Unfortunately not. But when you have a situation where you are a legislator that's trying to defend that and saying, okay, here's what's feasible. Yeah, I would like to do a $1.6 billion tax cut, which equals the surplus, but the only thing that we're going to get signed by Governor Dayton is $900 million. Most people don't want to hear that. And I understand why they're angry, because they sent this firebrand out, and they're not necessarily following through on what they said. But I think, to maybe answer your questions of what my role or what the party's role is to do, is maybe set up some sort of process, a suggested process to all of the counties and the Senate districts and the House districts to say, look, you have a 9-point platform for the Republican Party. You should judge your legislators based on this, and if they're kind of wobbly on one or two things, like Dario Anselmo, pro-choice, doesn't bother me. He's a rocker Republican when it comes to everything else, so that's fine. But when it comes to if you're going down to 3 or 4 things that the person's going a little off the rails on, then maybe you have some sort of process in place with the BPOU to remove their list access, remove their endorsement, say, this person is not someone that we are comfortable endorsing. There should be consequences. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be consequences for people that go off the rails. If they go off the rails on 1 or 2 issues, nobody's perfect. I probably don't agree with myself 100% of the time. So, it's...
And I'll say for myself, I'm not 100% in agreement with the Republican platform either.
Yeah.
I'm not. You aren't either.
No.
I mean, we aren't. It's I think it is a greater good when it comes to that. I think you're right. I think one of the problems is we haven't held our own people accountable, and that falls on the BPOUs.
Yeah. Right.
State party doesn't tell you who to endorse. It's not their job.
Yep.
I mean,
nor should it be.
No, no, absolutely not.
No,
every BPO is different.
And that's the thing. I mean, you look at people that run, and sometimes they're the only one that steps up to run. Jeff Lundy, great example. We talked about earlier. You said you weren't going to get in the way of that whole thing, but now that it's over, it's like, definitely not a conservative. There should be some process in place to make sure there's a choice. I mean, what can we do as far as building some sort of a farm team? I mean, and how does that relate to local politics, if at all?
What? Way to bring it back around. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, that's what this is. I mean, that's what you guys are advocating for very well, I think, because when you have an area that is very Republican, but you have a lot of places. So, like, you have a 3 or 4 county area that's a single Senate, state Senate seat, and you have a couple of liberal enclaves with a couple of liberal mayors, population centers or something like that. And you don't have other Republicans that are, everyone in the county, they're all county commissioners, but they're all 80 years old. They have, there's no one that's like a really viable. And then you get like some exciting young Democrat candidate who comes in and is going to win this race. Well, no, we lost the opportunity to beat that person back 20 years or 10 years before by making sure they didn't win the mayoral race or making sure they didn't get on the city council or the county commission in the first place, and then having our own people that are cycling through, and you can judge what they have done in the past. If they've been effective on the county board in fighting those mandates, if they've been on their city council and put in bike lanes in Grand Rapids, what is this person's track record? You actually can do that. And local government is important, but usually you're on a city council with 10 or 5 to 10 other people. So your one vote and your one voice is important, and you can be judged on what you do, but you're not going to ruin something as a wishy-washy Republican on one of those races.
It's a lot easier to recall somebody from a city council seat than a state seat.
Right. Yeah.
It is, and if you have, I think, a network of people to pull from, you've got somebody that you can put in that place. Whereas not everybody wants to run a statewide race, but you can groom people over time if they like what happens in a city, a city council setting. If they like what happens as a county commissioner, sometimes they can be convinced, that to step up.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm running a statewide race right now for deputy chair.
Oh,
I'm all over the place. So, driving all over the place, calling when I'm not driving, and, it's crazy. So, yeah, I understand why people like to stay local. And if I run for actual office, I like to stay local because it's kind of...
Well, let me ask you one more thing here. We'll kind of wrap it up real soon here. But what are you hearing? I'm curious to what the feedback, part of your job is listening. That's a big part of your job. I mean, you're representing the party is what you're aiming to do. I mean, what do you hear from people that you talk to? What do they want to see out of not just the party, but government generally speaking? I mean, what's the feedback that you get?
So, since I am running for maybe more of an executive role, I tend to try to keep focused on those things when I'm having conversations with delegates. So it's like I'm having 300 different job interviews with all of the delegates at State Central, and they all want to talk about something different, which is fine. So a lot of them are, we're talking about data, we're talking about communications, party responsiveness, caucuses, things like that, or messaging. Since I have a background in advertising and I have an MBA, I like talking about that, so I try to steer the conversation towards things that I enjoy more. And that's not to say that I don't want to talk about the caucus packets that we will use in 2018, and that's important. However, that's not necessarily what most of the people are going to be making their decision for deputy chair on. When I do get into policy, because some people will still ask me, am I pro-life? What do I think about this issue and whatnot? So,
yeah, do people misunderstand what the role of a deputy chair really is?
Yes.
You're not deputy chair, you're not a policy guy.
I mean, and what surprises me about that is, and this doesn't happen often, but it does happen when I'm calling State Central delegates and alternates, where if I go door knocking for a state house candidate and the person is asking questions about a local issue that the state candidate has no power, or a federal issue, like what should we do about Syria, and I'm door knocking for a state senate candidate,
all the time.
I can't do anything about that. What surprises me is there are a few conversations that I've had where people the delegates and alternates a few of them have asked me questions like that, not to try to vet me as a conservative. And I understand when people ask questions like that, and I have no problem answering them. But they're asking me what I'll do about that issue, not what do I think about it, or like, are you pro-life? And they ask me that because they want to make sure that I'm conservative, and that's okay. But if someone asks me, how are you going to end abortion, not how am I going to get candidates elected and message effectively on that issue to win the governor's race, but they want to know like what steps I'm going to take to have world peace or do something like that, and that is surprising to me. But luckily it's rare. Usually the people that run for state central delegate, they've been involved in the party. There are new people that don't necessarily get the role, but yeah, I would say that to sum that up, a lot of what people want to see from the Republican Party is effectively managing the operations to get conservatives elected. Most people understand that there's no role of the state party to really say this candidate is not worthy of your endorsement, or no one's really asking for that. But they want to know that they have an organization that is going to have their back for the county and the Senate district and the House district level, with all the operations and all the work that needs to be done. And that's really the thing that I'm promising to provide.
That's great. Wow, a lot of stuff here today.
All over the place.
Let's enter the cool down phase for just a bit. That was a lot of work. No, it was good. Do you have any stories that stand out to you just from traveling around all the different places in Minnesota? Is there anything that I don't know, either you thought was really interesting or fun, or we won't make you call out towns you hate or anything like that. That's not going to help your cause. But
let me see. So yeah, I have been to a lot of different places. And it was nice because it gets me out to see tons of different places all around the state. I had a good campaign story. I really did. I thought about this because there was something that happened like a few months ago, and now I am literally blanking on the whole story that I had, like specifically for situations like this. I was like, what was a funny thing that happened to you? And now you put me on the spot and I can't remember it. I don't know, talk for a few more seconds and maybe it'll come to me. I don't know.
All right. Well, Andrew, I know that you and I have discussed this stuff all the time, and how it is important to build a farm team from the ground up, and how it's all the stuff that happens top down from the state level, and we're not seeing the change we want, and it's just this gradual, we've got to put the right structure in place from the bottom. And
well, I think it comes from electing like-minded people, and people who are going to say, okay, we don't need regional government to do this, or regional government at all. We don't need it seems like to me, whatever party is in charge wants to push something down, and then the party that's not in charge argues for local control, and then it flip-flops when whoever isn't in charge, and vice versa. And I think what we need is a mindset. I don't care what letters by somebody's name. We need the mindset of, we have a Constitution that we need to follow. We need to follow all the amendments to the Constitution, not just the second, or not just the ones we talk about all the time. They're all of equal importance. And I think largely, I question whether we ever have that. You take something fundamental, okay? We'll get off subject a little bit.
We're in the heat up phase now.
Because
we're back in the heat up.
It's our show, and I can do that. You take something like K-12.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go off the rails a little bit. Our Constitution in Minnesota says we are to provide for a uniform system of public schools. It doesn't say it has to look like it does.
Right.
So where is the change happening? When one party's out of power, they argue this, then they get in and they don't do that. Another party's out of power, they argue this, they get in, they don't do that either. One party complains about No Child Left Behind, they get into power, they take all the money. I mean, where is the... When I want difference makers, and I'm willing to, I've said this before, I'll work with anybody who hates me. If I can get results that result in a transfer of power, what we've had since the income tax amendment and the direct election of U.S. senators, you and I have talked about this, if we've had a direct transfer, states have been detached from the federal government ever since 1913, and with our money, our property can be confiscated at any level of anybody. The Federal Reserve can print money that devalues our property. I mean, how do we get a mindset of the government closest to you should be the most important, and it doesn't matter if my party, whatever that is in charge or not. We are going to push down the responsibility. I mean, it feels like we can never get there.
That's fantastic, because we focus on federal elections because people watch the cable news shows, they read the newspapers, not so much.
They
but
come out and vote in the presidential year. That's when they come out and vote.
Well, it's because that's where the attention is, and to a lesser degree on the state houses. But because there's so many cities, so many townships, it's hard to focus on all the local things. It's hard to know what's going on, but it is out there. I mean, a lot of city council meetings are on cable access TV. You're able to just take a night and go and watch a city council meeting if you want. But I argue that we need more groups like us that blog and that tell about what's going on and educate and shed light on these kinds of things, because that will bring more attention and that will cause people to sit up and care about what's going on in their city.
For the listeners, I am nodding because I agree. Yes, we do need more people like you. We need more of this sort of mentality, where the local stuff should be the most important and the local stuff should get the focus of the voters. Figuring out exactly how to do that, you've had some success here. I'd love to see you export it, and having that as a model and showing what can be done, even in the most unforgiving of places, should give people hope all over the state.
Well, thank you.
Well, I mean, we've said it before. We've talked about how many areas should have certain councils or certain county commissioners, and have it opposite of how the people vote one way. And Crystal's a good example where we've made inroads with people without a label by their name. Mm-hmm. It's not like they walk in the booth and it's, oh, okay, what's my down the line,
right?
What is so and so telling me how to vote? I think that's critical, that we get people who have a name for themselves, but it's not associated with whatever you think of somebody in Washington. Mm-hmm. Whatever you think of somebody in St. Paul, there's the local issues, and it's really the truth, are so different. I mean, we've talked about in Crystal how we dealt with the airport, and we've dealt with light rail, and I've dealt with people on both parties who are on opposite sides. We've dealt with the streets and how we pay for those. Yeah. And the comprehensive plan, and it doesn't fall strictly down some one column or another when you talk about a D or an R.
Exactly. So I think bottom line, that's it. I mean, we just need to shed more light on what happens locally, because people don't have as many options to pay attention.
And for the record, I did not remember my funny story. So, I tried, but then you guys sucked me in with interesting conversation.
We believe you anyway.
Yeah, something funny happened, and it was great on the campaign trail. That's all I got.
That's all right.
It's late. What do you want?
Yeah, it is late. Oh, my word.
It is late. Yeah.
Well, before we close out, anything else you want to say, or you want to rep your website, or your hit songs on Spotify?
Probably a good idea. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, running for deputy chair has been a really wonderful experience. If I win, I'm excited. It will be a challenge. 2018 is a big deal, and I really want us to win the governor's race. And not just the governor's race. I care about state auditor. That's kind of the local race of the statewide races, really, because no one pays attention to state auditor's race. So I want to get behind the state auditor's candidate. Everyone else is talking about governor, secretary of state. State auditor, that's what I care about.
Yeah, we don't need anybody to win that's endorsed by the very agencies they're supposed to be audited.
That's true.
Do we really want that? Now it's running for governor.
Yeah, again, that's a whole other podcast. But
when you win, we'll have you back to talk.
All auditor for a full hour. It'll be great. So win or lose, I'm on the board of the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'm on the board as the outreach chair of the Young Republicans. I'm the chair emeritus as of 3 hours ago of the 5th Congressional District, so I have a position on the full board. So I'm looking forward to being engaged here in the 5th Congressional District, also as outreach chair in places far around the state. And if I can combine that with my deputy chair's role, that would be fantastic, because I could be helping the party, repping the party in places very far away, and also building up the next generation of leaders in the Young Republicans, and hopefully working with you guys to change the city councils in a lot of places all over the state. My name is Dave Pascoe. I'm a licensed attorney, certified financial planner, Lieutenant Commander in the Navy Reserves. My website is David Paul Pascoe. That's Pascoe. Yeah.
So you're a financial planner. Okay, I own some stock in Microsoft. Do you think I should? No, I'm kidding. No, I actually do. But
we can talk about that's a whole.
Let him finish the website.
DavidPaulPascoe.com.
Oh my
That
word.
is the website. It is late. It is 4:00 in the morning. Just believe me. So that's
out on the West Coast.
Yeah, on the West Coast.
Wait.
Yeah. But no, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, Dave.
Sure,
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck. Any last words of wisdom, Andrew?
I've used up all my wisdom.
Then we're shutting her down. That's it. We're done. Thank you guys very much, and we will see you again very soon.